Hello. Welcome to episode 4 of the End of the Beginning podcast. In this episode, we discuss self-acceptance, weeding your spiritual garden, and the value of internal resourcing. We chat about playing the ego game, attuning to the emotional needs of others, and comparing yourself to your previous self instead of everybody else. We hope you enjoy what you hear, and if you'd like to submit any questions for upcoming episodes, please contact us at theendofthebeginningpodcast@gmail.com. Alternatively, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Instagram. Thanks for listening.
You know, there's methods you can learn from a book or from a teacher or from Instagram.
Yeah.
And then there's methods that you come up with spontaneously all by yourself.
Yeah.
And there's like, oh, did I come up with that unconsciously drawing on other impressions? It's like, definitely can't exclude that. It's definitely there. A thing that I love doing and find very natural is playing with sounds, which this is your wheelhouse, you'll love this, is when I'm alone, I'll often find myself feeling like I've got a backlog of emotion to process. Like, okay, it's like neurological input, like there's sounds and images and, pressure or will or impressions coming from people and your desires from them like all day. And you could see that as neurological input, like it's coming all day. And then all of a sudden there's the absence of that. And then you've got this window to process it. I think I learned that most distinctly with babies. Like babies have, once you turn the lights off and there's no more, when it's bedtime, there's no more neurological input. So they tend to just purge and move all this surplus energy from the day. And once it's out, then they'll sleep deep and it's really beautiful. And it's not always that black and white, but it's definitely got applicability. I think that applies to adults as well. And
do you think we cut that off though? Like it's a natural process. If I'm hearing you right, it's a natural process that babies are born with, and even kids probably. But over time we tune it out.
That feels about right. What would be an example? So if you've had a busy day, or some dude called Daryl has had a busy day.
Poor Daryl.
Tough Tuesday for Daryl. And so he comes home and single dude, whatever, and now his dinner's being gestated and he sits in his room and
well, I think before that, like he sticks his microwave dinner in the, or he cooks himself some food if you hope, and then he watches TV to try and blunt the emotions. He drinks a couple of beers. Yeah. To try and blunt the emotions, and then goes to bed. No routine or no ritual before bed for expressing self.
Makes sense, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, particularly when you look at like the schooling model, like there's nothing of any
emptiness.
Yeah, of that. There's nothing that they're just starting to teach, like stretching and but in the last sort of 30 years, they started teaching stretching. And
I think I do really well with emptiness. It's also worth saying
Explain
sometimes.
That? What do you mean?
Well, yeah, right. So that's worth clarifying. So like when I remove any form of stimulus, and you could even say, well, alcohol would be a form of distortion, which is a form of stimulus because it's taking you away from your natural state. So if using the baby, when you go to put the baby to bed and the lights go off and there's no music and there's no talking and there's no eye contact's a big one for little ones, for humans, but particularly for little babies. So all input is removed and you've got about as close to emptiness as you're going to get. So now, rather than stuff going in, it starts to pour out. That can be, it's worth saying that could be really confronting in a given moment to have to sit with that. And what I was going to add is that for some nervous systems, maybe it's a bit too confronting. So when I say emptiness works really well for me, either naturally or through, a lot of practice or something. But I think about one of my children, for example, and emptiness can be more challenging for one child than the other, whereas something more like artful expression, like writing or drawing, is most of the way to emptiness. And yes, it's got creativity connotations, but it's most of the way to emptiness. so that it's like a meditation for her. And, you know, like it's only 10, 15 years ago, all that adult colouring books popped out and they were in vogue way to meditate. So yeah, so how close to emptiness can we get? And then the input stops, and so the output can take over.
Gotcha.
And coming right back to it, something that has spontaneously, like you've got a garden that's messy and a random flower pops out, and you're like, whoa, look at that thing. I didn't conceive that. I didn't intend that in any way. And there it is. Like, you could argue that's the most authentic version of anything, because just there it is. Undoubtedly it comes from doing mantra work and chanting and some throat chakra stuff. But basically, like, sitting there and finding that there's an energy in my body, like my heart or my throat, that wants to move, that wants to have some attention. So just sitting and feeling into these places in my body, and then noticing that there's a certain, if I make a sound, like usually it's a bit of a guttural, like, and I find from talking to your musical self now, Paul, that if I attune to the right pitch, tone, frequency of sound, it's as if the sound matches what's going on in the block, if you like. And then it starts to release, and I start to yawn and my eyes water and things come up and out. And it sounds pretty esoteric, but it's become a normal part of life. And it feels like a kid. I feel like a child just doing what feels natural. Like I'm moving my leg in a certain way to get some relief from a muscle spasm or something.
Stretching energy out.
Yeah, I'm just doing what, it's not contrived in any way. I'm not sticking to a method or trying to achieve. It's just like, it feels like a child doing something. And it's, I'm curious about what other people are doing in that way. What spontaneous and personal methods, like the little flower just popping open for people, like what's going on? Do you relate to that in any way?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. My brain goes into that kind of science space, which is how I saw the other day, is it Brahmari, I think it's called, where there's like a humming during yoga when you're doing certain, like, breathing. I think it's part of the breathwork part, the pranayama. Yeah. Is just to hum. You might do 5 deep breaths and then just hum a tone. And I think now they're starting to realize, particularly when you put that with a throat lock, that actually has a physiological effect on, like, the vagus nerve. So they're starting to kind of prove these ancient practices. I know that's a little different because it's a prescript ritual. It's not just something that you come up with.
Ancient precedents or whatever.
Yeah. But it's interesting, hey, like
the collision of those worlds.
Well, that's happening, that's been happening for the last 10 years. It's so interesting. I find it fascinating, the idea of consciousness, the unified field. I've just been listening to the telepathy tapes. I know I've been going on about it, but I was listening this morning, and then just like, it's quite exciting, the idea that, that we're actually just tapping into consciousness, perhaps, and we're not creating the consciousness. We are the consciousness, and we're tapping into it. But getting back to what you were talking about, because I don't want to skew off. I don't know if I have any. I mean, I do cold showers. I started doing like those. But that seems very kind of like, I know it's good for me and I feel great afterwards. I don't.
Yeah, but when we're talking about something that you stumbled across spontaneously in that way?
Yeah, no. I mean, I've definitely read about it first. And then, and not to talk about yoga too much, but again, like when I'm doing Kundalini, my old yogi, she was always talking about, like, just have cold showers, don't have hot showers. This is like, 30 years ago. It's so amazing. I feel like we're really slowly starting to catch up with what's been going on in the East for such a long time. But I mean, I sigh a lot. I don't know if that's something, but that's my decompression thing. It's something I do naturally. I don't do it on purpose. And, often my daughter or a friend will turn around and go, "Are you all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
Better now.
Oh, that was a big sigh. And you're like, "Oh, was it?" That's just me off-gassing or decompressing, So it's kind of similar in a way, but
and if someone wants to reverse engineer the science of that and go, well, what you're doing is creating a certain amount of tension in your throat that's corollary to a certain amount of agitation or agonism, like activation of your vagus nerve, which is pushing you down a parasympathetic path rather than a sympathetic. You're like, cool. Yeah. But this is something that I started doing spontaneously, it feels natural and fulfilling, provisioning, and it doesn't need the explanation. So double-edged sword of it all. On one edge, it's awesome that Western science is finding some overlap and agreeability with traditional Eastern practices or whatever. If you mess around with enough traditional Eastern practices, you'll see contradiction. Like Ayurveda, for example, is just like the traditional medicine of Hinduism, I suppose, generally doesn't prescribe a whole lot of coldness and would, vehemently resist that, counter-prescribe or whatever. So there's contradictions everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful too. If you go to reputable bodies for information and they contradict each other, you might have a phase of tearing yourself in two, the dissonance of the discomfort of going, what do I trust?
Who
what
to
do I
believe?
do?
Yeah.
But eventually you'll turn back to
whatever
intuition.
feels good.
You'll turn back to feeling. There's something innate.
Yeah.
And so we're very careful, I think, with, a new truth has arisen through pop culture or pop psychology or an Eastern wisdom has dripped into Western culture, and Western culture agrees with it. It's like, cool. That might be close to the frontier of consciousness discovery exploration right now, but it won't be there for long. We just keep going. So maybe the best way to equip ourselves is, sure, take feedback from the outside world, but the primary relationship is between Paul and his soul, or Paul and his inner world. And so we're dialoguing with that. And what does that dialogue look like? Well, if you can get quiet and you can clean up some of the distractions between Paul and his soul, let's say, or Paul's human self and his higher self, then that conversation can become just a bit crisper and a bit cleaner and clearer, and you can move intuitively through your life. And what the goal isn't to become some God man, more ethereal than human. The goal is to be fully human and fully esoteric, if you like, to have both halves of yourself online at once. So we're fulfilling the promise of a soul having a deep, vivid, robust, inspired human experience. And you can't detour from neither of those halves can be diminished in that process. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's wonderful.
Of equal importance. I mean, there seemed to have been like this kind of, when I say that, I guess I can only talk about my own experience, where I've kind of prioritized the mind expansion or the consciousness expansion or the enlightenment, weird word these days, the search for it or the, journey towards it. And then you realize, like, it's actually about holding both of those things, because one without the other is, pointless.
Yeah.
You already have one, like when you return back to the kind of conscious field or whatever you want to call it, God, or you already have that.
Yeah.
And when you're born, you already have, your physical experience without any other inputs.
Yeah.
And so over time, I guess it makes sense to try and balance the two and see what you can get to.
Of course, my mind's spiraling in a lot of directions because it's a
meaty topic.
It's juicy, yeah.
Yeah.
So like one would be, there's this divinity which is perhaps best described and first described by its infinity, its infinite nature. Since I was a little kid, so, well, what's God? I don't know. There's people have different views. You can see that there's these different religious perspectives at least. But the fact that everybody seems to agree that it's infinite, whatever it is, it's infinite. And we know somehow, and again, this is my primary school brain, somehow we know that space is also infinite. So it's easy for God. That was an acceptable truth, almost like something to lock in and leave. You just have to believe it because you can't really comprehend it. Well, I think that's why, because it is so brain exploding.
Yeah.
The fact that space goes forever, like, Dad, what's after those
I used to think about that as a little kid.
There's the stars in the broader galaxy, and I think it's a rite of
I used to think
passage
about
for every little kid.
the end of the edge of the universe, like where it's expanding. And I'm like, but what's behind it? What is it expanding into?
Yeah.
As a brick wall. Okay, well, what's behind the brick wall? As a guy frying eggs. You know, like, okay, well, what's behind the guy frying eggs? Like, it goes on forever. Like, it's such a, like, fascinating...
So listen to the expansion in your voice. Like, it's wonderment.
Yeah.
Also, this is the most pedestrian conversation.
Of course.
I presume every child is having this conversation. So those wonderful things usually have that paradox in them. Like having a baby. Like, it's the most miraculous thing you can possibly do. It feels like you've just created a whole new universe, and you didn't do it. It happened through you, and yet you were a massive part of it, so you kind of did do it. And also, there is nothing more cookie cutter and bland and pedestrian in the human experience than to procreate, because that's like the whole system's set up for it.
To drive.
It's that's not the lamest thing, but it's the simplest thing to do.
Yeah.
The most pedestrian and the most...
Don't need to study. Don't need a license.
Outrageous. Yeah.
Don't need
maturity.
No,
just a few key organs functioning and you're good to go.
It's a heartbeat, a pulse.
Yeah. I wonder how, and we're talking about it, and however many ears are listening, I wonder how many people don't resonate with the concept of creating silence in your life. Creating windows of emptiness. So like, wow, no, surely not. How inefficient. I'm not doing anything. I think
like that's so topical for me, because it's like, if I'm not cognizant of the amount of time I'm filling my life in those gaps, filling it with stuff, listening to a podcast, social media, or even reading an ebook or whatever it is, I can literally fill my life with stuff.
Every waking second.
And there's no time for contemplation. And that's talked about a lot. You know, how being left to ruminate and letting your mind wander and stuff is becoming a thing of the past, which is crazy. It's literally where all creativity comes from, I think. You know, those empty spaces where the mind just kind of, like in the studio, if you sit down and you're like, I'm going to write a song. Yeah, you can write a song. It's probably not going to be great. You might be one of the lucky ones who can sit down and just write a great song like that. But generally it's farting around so many times. You know, an artist is like just farting around on an instrument. You're like, oh, what's that? Oh, nothing. I was just...
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's exactly.
Because it's like play.
It's play, yeah. And it's just the fact that, you know, you can take that kind of like unintentional creation and then you can start molding it. You can start making it into something. But that's rarer and rarer. Even like, I know it's not, you know, this is my world, but like even like reading lyrics off a phone, you know, even typing into a phone instead of writing them on pad or in a book.
Them on a phone.
Yeah, such a different experience.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, I reckon, like the way the brain works. The fact that we don't really leave time. And a lot of artists do leave time for it because they understand the importance of, or they've learnt the importance of it. I used to work with this beautiful lyricist, and he would just carry around a little moleskin notebook in his back pocket everywhere. And you'd go and have a coffee with him and stuff. You'd be talking and there might be a break in the conversation and it comes out and a line goes down. You know, a line or two goes down. But it's just like, you know, that just is like that.
It does sound a little bit like the smartphone distraction of the 70s or something. It's like, God, always with the notepad. Get your head out of your books. Really live.
That's his priority though. You know, like he's prioritizing, and he's a beautiful lyricist, like tells great stories in his songs. But there's an intentionality to that emptiness, you know. And I think we have to become more intentional these days rather than
about creating these passages of silence.
Yeah, like when I was a kid, I remember like getting bored as batshit, you know, and you had to go and do something. Waiting for, you know, get picked up after school and mum was late or whatever it was, or the bus had broken down or whatever it was.
I've got a lot of memories of sitting at bus stops and stuff. And to be honest, most of them are feeling hard done by and resentful for my parents not being there sooner or something. How unfair it all was.
Wasting my life.
I think that's probably quite a me thing, like a passive aggression, resentment or something. But perhaps what's interesting to me anyway is like when there is no input and there is just sitting, then those emotions that are there have nothing to hide behind.
Totally.
And so then I process them.
Yeah.
And then behind, so you could say that, rephrasing that whole blueprint, that there are some feelings, some overwhelmed feelings that aren't representative of my core identity, you could say. You could say, like, my soul doesn't feel angry at my parents, but my personhood does, and it's totally valid. But the pain generated is the detour from alignment with the higher parts of myself.
Yeah.
And in order to come back to that alignment, I've got to process these emotions. So pain isn't caused, things aren't inherently painful, but if your soul disagrees with your personhood in that moment, you'll experience that disconnect and separation as pain. Yeah, as emotional pain. That's just an idea to play with, but one that I like sometimes. So by sitting in that space, then you process that emotion, and that really is just as simple as feeling it.
Yeah.
And it can sound like this really advanced skill, but it might be as simple as just being quiet.
Yeah.
And then noticing how you feel and going, well, I don't know what it is. Do I have to give it a label? There are a lot of conversations like this where it's like, stop asking me for specificity. I'm overwhelmed. It's like, oh, you're overwhelmed. Great. That's enough. Great. Let's do that.
Yeah.
And then so you could distill all that down to everything you want is on the other side of the discomfort. That's there. And it doesn't mean we're out there pursuing discomfort, becoming warriors for chasing down our own demons all the time. Or, martyr might be a more pronounced version of that. But just seeing what's present, that's all. What's there. And if it is something like the discomfort we're pointing to, then just allowing it to be there, just sitting with it and going, okay, there it is. So if I go to Paul and say, bro, I am so anxious, and you go, you got no reason to be, fuck off. That would be whatever the opposite of, that would be invalidation.
Yeah.
But if you had the bandwidth, which to your credit you often do, and I'm there and I say, I feel so anxious, man. And you're like, sit down, tell me about it. And I say, I feel really anxious because this happened, and this happened, and it stirred me up big time. And I feel disappointed in this situation or whatever. You'd be like, well, that makes sense to me now that you've described it. So sometimes that's enough. So that would be like an external validation. And then I feel, right, I'm allowed to feel this way. Really all that's happened is you've created some empty space of non-judgment so that I can get in touch with the core feeling and make it okay. You could argue that the bigger thing you're doing is modeling what I can do for myself. We'll always have the need and utility for other people, I think, because we're mammals. Or maybe pack mammals specifically, herd animals, something. So co-regulation and interdependence is a part of this humaning that's really, really rich. And of course, other people grow us too by holding us to account at the other end of that stick. But the primary modeling there, I think, is that you're showing me what I can do for myself on the regular. And I can be my own listener, and I can create space to go, hey man, this is how you feel. One of these spontaneous things we were talking about before, a quote that popped into my head, I guess it's not a quote, it's just an insight, I suppose, was that I might be too sensitive for him and her and them, like this, which rephrasing what too sensitive might be, the power and intensity of this emotion and validity of it might be unreasonable to him and her and they and mum and dad and whoever. I might be too much for them. I might be too sensitive for them, but I can't be too sensitive for me. Which is to say that all emotions are valid. That doesn't excuse toxic behavior. That doesn't mean you're allowed to play it out any way you want. But the primary feeling itself, rage, resentment, jealousy, whatever color it's painted in, they're all welcome. So I may be too sensitive for everybody else, but I can't be too sensitive for myself. And
there's something too, I think, really beautiful about self-validating your own isness, just how you are, like that beautiful acceptance. You know, like there's something like really powerful and really potent about that, I think.
Yeah, can you think of an example? Not necessarily with story, but
sure. Like I mean, this probably doesn't feel. It was a big thing for me, but maybe it doesn't feel that big for hearing it out loud because it happened when I was young. But I had an experience as a kid. I loved the Muppets, and I had this experience of like singing a Muppet song, and just like belting out. And the music teacher was kind of like, "This is beautiful singing, children," and I'm like, "It's me!" Like I'm singing my heart out. It's me, and she just off the cuff was like, "It's not you, Paul. It's everyone." And I think I just took that in as like, "No, it's not you."
Yeah.
You know, like these little kind of things that go in.
Yeah.
And for me, I believe that like most of my, like I was like a nerdy drama kid and music, like wanted to be in the music theatres, wanted to be on stage really, but didn't want to sing because it wasn't me.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't it. And I think it's taken a long time to get to a place where you learn to accept that wasn't true. It takes time, but I now understand this really deep resonance of the importance of everybody's voice. Like, and you collect a little. Well, I've collected like little sayings, like if only the beautiful birds sang in the forest, it'd sound pretty lonely.
If only the beautiful birds sang in the forest, it would sound pretty lonely.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like everybody should sing. And I've had, you know, and then you do the work. So I then went to singing teachers and, you know, went through like embarrassing, like they're telling me to do scales and hitting high notes and going, wow, that's really high. That's such a beautiful, and then bursting into tears and going, what is wrong with me? You know,
how old do you think you were when you cracked open like that?
Oh, like in my 20s.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. After like my band had been disbanded.
It's not remotely surprising. I think for the sake of the audience, Paul's a professional musician and composer, and I'm an amateur guitarist and singer, so very different. But I
would never profess to be professional.
We're sitting in Paul's music studio, by the way. The disingenuity and pretentiousness of that comment is laid across the walls.
I don't know if anyone's ever professional, you know, like
humbled by the craft.
Everyone's just having a bit of a play.
And yet your voice is your own, and there is no other quite like it.
Yeah. Well, that's another one, isn't it? Like, that's another saying that I realized that helped me. So the birds in the forest was one. The other one was, no one has ever sounded like you in the history of the universe.
Yeah.
No one's ever sounded, and when you go, no one will ever sound like you again. Holy crap.
Yeah, deal with it.
It's massive.
Deal with it. Sit with that.
And I think it came into that thing of being seen and being heard, you know, and just swallowing that. But I think like once you realize you can be your own self-healer, you can be your own moderator, you can moderate yourself. I think it's such a powerful thing. You start to learn that, the reason that the singer in my old band didn't want me to sing some of the songs that I was starting to write was because he didn't want to share the limelight. He wasn't ready for that. And that's not to say anything negative against him. That's just to go, that was where he was at. And I was at somewhere else, you know. But we were both unable to communicate that with enough vulnerability to understand each other's positions. Yeah.
I wonder about a broader arc too. It's like if the universe is never in opposition to you in any real way. I mean, this is a dangling, this is an invitation, I suppose, rather than an objective fact, maybe, although it feels pretty solid to me, but that the universe is your lover. The universe is your best friend. It is your soulmate. And from I don't know if it's metaphysical or from a vibrational, energetic point of view, it's the bigger part of you. Like there's Paul here manifest in a contracted energy, and then there's all the stuff that isn't contracted, the stuff that's still open and fluid and in infinity. So the premise being like, there's no place that God isn't, and that includes you, but it goes the other way too. So if God's everywhere, then so are you. Yeah, so the broader arc would be that it wasn't the right time for you either. Yeah, there was a kind of not a glitch in the method, but because of an inefficiency to communicate, as you point out, between the two of you, you weren't able to get where you wanted at the time. But the premise being that it was going to be juicier to experience that later, when there was more of you able to hold yourself, and it comes out
100%.
later
You
on.
have to be capable.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
To hold your own
It's
bigness
crazy
or
because I'm in my
something.
40s going, I'm learning lessons now that I have friends, like close friends, that are in their 20s and 30s and they're learning them. And I'm like, far out. You guys are so far ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Which is
Whatever that
awesome.
means. But then the goals themselves, whoever's at the whatever cluster of human beings are at the outer edge of the frontier are expanding it more. So this
Yes.
is infinity. It doesn't stop. There is no rush. And yet we do also want to align with the best parts of ourselves and have the most joy that we can, and the most authenticity in human relationship. And
One thing that has definitely become apparent to me is like, if you're not getting busy on, I used to say on your demons, but that feels a little bit like, but it's like if you're not getting busy on your demons, they're getting busy on you. You know, like it really is a thing. It's a thing. Either you're working on yourself or you're kind of collapsing in on yourself.
so what does that look like this week in your life, without, specific
This
reveals
week?
necessarily? Yeah.
Well, I'm in a state of expansion at the moment because I'm hyper aware of the opportunities that exist, even if they're presented to me as obstacles. It's just such a powerful thing to be able to see all parts of your life as an opportunity. Like, and I'm not saying that from I'm saying it from a place of gratitude, like incredible gratitude, because it's such a powerful thing.
So you're saying for like, if you don't face the stuff, you said demons, if you don't face the stuff, then it will ride roughshod over you.
It
kind of thing. It'll
like gets
dominate
all
you.
the way to a neuroses, I think. Like that's where they stem, like it's you literally plant a seed of something in your mind as a child, as a young adult, and it will grow into a full tree of whatever is shading out this beautiful part of yourself.
Almost sounds like weeding a garden, like doing perpetual cleanup work.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I feel like, I just, that has been my experience, I should say.
Yeah. But
And
what I hear in it is you're saying that I position myself to work with life, to work with the phenomena of the universe, bring up and confront me with, so that I'm postured opportunistically to meet it and go, look, I don't have to understand all this, but I'm going to work with it because I haven't got a plan B. There isn't a better way for me. And probably that's hard earned. And I've tried to grab it by the neck and pin it to the ground, and it doesn't work. I've got to work with it. And so coming back to what I was saying before, like, well, if we stand in opposition to the universe, we're really standing in opposition to the larger part of ourselves.
yeah, 100%.
And so being willing to work with it. And there's a nuance wrinkle in there but that also includes like practicing surrender and acceptance to all things. But that fiercely and importantly includes your desire to make changes, because the specificity of our individuality, who we are, how we feel about certain things, is a form of discernment, prejudice, judgment. That's all in there. And discernment's a much prettier word to play with, as if we've established in another episode somewhere along the line, versus judgment.
Right.
Because that has a heaviness to it. But there's no way around it. That you choose who... Yeah, so we practice in surrender to what is, and that includes our desire to make changes in the future. And reconciling those two things is what it is to be both soul and human. Because you do want to make the world a better place. You do want better relationships with your family and your loved ones, and you do want a better financial situation for yourself typically.
Yeah.
And those are all exquisite desires because they create the path they create the direction of the spaceship that you're moving with. Sometimes the oversimplification of things can look like just surrender, surrender, surrender. I think from the outside looking in, perhaps that's what the monastic paths of different spiritual forms look like, is that you give up desire altogether but I think it's a really important layer to dance with that I do desire to make. Buddha was a political activist, so clearly there was a deliberate agenda to make positive change in a very human way. What keeps coming up for me today is that the intention of the podcast isn't to, and any good dialogue, I suppose, isn't to cover really interesting content, although that you'd hope that would happen.
Hopefully a byproduct.
Not to cover interesting content, not to explain it in such a clean and concise way that it's really palatable to all ears or the majority of listeners, or again, hopefully a byproduct. But the premise is that we sit down together and explore and see what feels really resonant, and actually not create a wonderful product as a podcast primarily, but create an opening and a warmth and a depth of access to ourselves through the dialogue.
Yeah.
So I think of it as like we're sitting around this fire of spiritual energy, or just positive warming energy, if you like, something additive, and we're going back and forth and trying to find something more and more representative of our true selves as we talk. Okay, that's a little truer. Okay, that feels more authentic. I'm going to follow that thread and follow that thread. And over time, we work each other into a lather, and this fire gets brighter and brighter, and more nourishing, warming, all the things. And we sit around the fire, and we're all warmed by it.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for going on a journey, not knowing where the destination is. And that's what feels like that's what we're doing here. It's like we're like, okay, well, I have pretty good walks with you, metaphor. We seem to walk well together. You've got good stuff in your backpack. I've got good stuff in mine. And it's just like there's something really beautiful about just allowing the process to unfold. It's like listening to music. You don't listen to music because you want to get to the end of it as fast as you can. You just listen to it just for the pure joy of it. And it feels a little bit like, that's the journey. And like life, it's the same thing with life. It's the journey of it. I used to get so caught up in what was the destination of my life, and then I base my happiness on that thing that's over there on the horizon that I'm going towards. And if I didn't get any closer to it, I was miserable, or I was a piece of shit, or whatever terrible dialogue I was telling myself. And just, again, such a lovely gift to realize that the reason for your life and the power and guts in your life is right now. It's the thing that you're doing right now. It's the journey that you're having right now. It's the places you're going. Not necessarily physically, it can be, metaphysically, but, where are you exploring? Where are you going? Are you still in that grind? You're still in that place of like, I've got to get this to be happy, and I've externalized my happiness into a thing or into somebody else, approval from someone else. Like when you can bring that stuff back inside you, far out, man.
Yeah.
For me personally, it's been so incredibly powerful because you're now responsible for your happiness, nobody else.
So what's a specific example of, whether it be financially or relationally?
Oh man, I wanted to be a rock star.
Yeah.
If there wasn't I can't think of more of a screaming metaphor of emptiness inside than wanting fans. And I've been so close to that space a few times, and have come to realize that that's an emptiness inside me that I'm trying to fill with the adoration of other people, to tell me I'm worthy of something, to tell me that, yes, you are good enough. Yes, you are. And then, speaking to friends who have been very successful in their, in their musical careers or even in TV or film, and they're all like, it's not it.
Yeah.
You get to the end, you get to that space and you're like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. I'm still as unhappy as I was beforehand. I've got to go get my happiness. I've got to go and reclaim my happiness. Bring it back to where it belongs inside yourself,
Bring it back to where it belongs.
Yeah.
Perhaps find it where it always was.
Correct.
The guillotine cliche hanging over the conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
About to drop.
Yeah.
So, something like, coming back to saying before about the the metaphor of Paul holding space for Luke and giving him the validation to feel like his feelings are okay.
Yeah.
Similarly, like, I want to feel like singing voice is a great fit here. I want to feel like the unique energy signature of my voice, one, exists as unique and just is. I am.
Yeah.
And therefore the expression of my voice is me externalized. So it's some evidence that I exist. And two, that has inherent value.
Yeah.
And then we're talking about, like, I went to Millions and they said it was valuable. And in one scenario that was achieved, I went to Millions and they said, that's really valuable. And then I went, that was a dopamine hit for a couple of years, and I distracted myself with rock and roll. And I went really fast in the Lamborghini into the wall, and whatever the Hollywood cliche would be. The opposite would be you never got to the Millions, but they both end in the same place.
Yeah.
Which would be, shit, I have a voice, it is unique, and it's valuable. That's still just a thought exercise. So what is it that puts us in touch with the fact that I have a voice, it's my own, there is no other like it, and it has value? You can't get there intellectually. It's got to be experienced. And, okay, what is experience? It's something that must be felt and I suppose known, but that's more like feeling the truth and inherent buoyancy and vulnerability value of something. Yeah, so finding the value of self, I don't think it can be articulated. It has to be experienced. So the simplest, I suppose, not to say that it's easy, but perhaps the simplest is in some sort of meditative pursuit to sit there and find silence, and then beyond silence find something corollary to emptiness, and then in that emptiness to notice that, and this is the maybe the best I've got to articulate a way to get there, and then noticing that in that emptiness there's fullness. So I've said it in the pod before, I'm sure, but saying now, if you can contemplate walking someone through a meditation, if you're in that emptiness now and you can feel, there's some thoughts moving through now and then, and there's some feelings arising and descending like waves in the ocean, but generally there is a vacuousness, a spaciousness, an emptiness. And you go, does it feel nice to be there? It's like, when the thoughts and the feelings dissipate, it does. It feels nice to be there. Okay, does that place need anything added to it? Like, no, it doesn't. It's really full. And then, is there any of you there? Might be the next thing to piggyback onto that. So we're circling around with language and form, like a method, a way of getting in touch with self, and going, one, it exists, and two, it needs nothing added to it. If it needs nothing added to it, it must be abundant in all the things. And so being able to hang in that place and then go, okay, well, circling right back to that, it needs no validation because it's fullness itself. Playing in that space. And then have enough of those moments, I suppose, and we stack 2 of them, and then we stack 200 of them over decades, and then this sense of self isn't created, it's already there, but we develop some sort of reassurance that then we could get strong enough to then journey out of the cave and then play. And of course we're doing this every day, but journey out and then have that sort of buoyancy of self, like as if the meditation fills the cup and then overflows onto all the other areas of your life. And that then you can be brave enough to play with someone that you love having a different story about you. Let's say like you're not as kind as you say you are or something, or in some form, because that happens all the time when kids get angry at us. It's like, you're not being as kind in the way that I want you to be right now, or it's spousal, or it's whatever. Work people. So we fill ourselves up with ourselves, and then we could say, well, even if I was the horrible thing that you say that I am, I would still have me. The whole thing boils down to something like all Paul ever has is Paul's essence, his Paulness. So if we cut off Paul's arms and legs and his aesthetic is removed, so he's got no utility to influence his environment with his handsomeness, and we cut his tongue out so he can't be charismatic and charming and communicative, and we remove his ability to make children, and we take everything away, so there's nothing left.
It sounds awful.
Well, to which part of it does it sound awful?
Yeah.
If you removed essentially every utility to other, so no one could use you for anything, all that would be left, I mean, what's left? I've asked that question to a few people, and with the exception of just one, which I won't get into now, but it still feels special somehow. But generally speaking, the overwhelming majority has said like, oh my God, that's a devastating exercise. And I don't know that I would have any utility. I think the truth of that exercise is that the only thing left is Paulness itself. You might say an essence of soul energy. That is that unique singing voice we were talking about before. So if you remove all the utility and you can't be used by anybody, you could only be enjoyed for your Paulness, would you still have value? And when we hope that the answer becomes a more and more radiant yes, it might start as a whisper.
You talk about inside yourself?
Yeah. So you were in touch with...
There's only one place for value to be garnered from, right?
Yeah. Well, this is the core of the exercise is that one, in the end, it's the only power that there is. It's certainly the only power worth having.
Yeah.
And when it's connected enough, no one's saying that like it's binary and once you get there, it's done. It's like going to the gym, you're refining these muscles all the time. And even if you got really good at it, there would still be plenty of work to do, as best as I can tell, that life becomes a very different thing.
Yeah.
Because you are internally resourced.
Yeah.
And now you can afford to dance more exotic dances. You can afford to be, I don't know about dangerous, but you can take chances. You could be creative. You could fail elegantly. Because... coming right back to an earlier topic, like the cheat code's on, in a way,
exactly,
and it's bastardizing the previous use of the cheat code thing. But yeah, like
it's a superpower.
Yeah, it's the superpower. It's and why? Because it's God.
Yeah,
and it's
but it's also true. I think also too for me, I may understand it differently to you, but it's like when you start to tap into that idea, you realize that your perception is truly the only thing that you have to sculpt your reality. So what perception can you conjure? What can you create for yourself? Because you can look out at the world as a horrific hellscape that is frightening and to be fearful and to be et cetera, or you can realize that you are part of a divine cosmic dance and that everything is constantly magnificent. Like you can. That's the truth, you know.
Yeah. So what happens when shit gets gnarly?
Yeah.
And that just feels like a bumper sticker.
Sure.
And so it is really. And so when you're at a 9 or a 10,
but
whoa.
What is the power of your ability to craft your perception?
Yeah.
Where can you get? You
Yeah.
know, what space can you get yourself to?
How steady is your relationship to yourself?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And how much juice is in there, and how much, like, for me, it comes down to how much love of self is there. Because if you really, really care about yourself, truly love yourself, then you want the best for yourself. And then you are constantly, on the path to finding a way to make things wonderful for yourself constantly. Which is not to say, like, because also pain is a great teacher, so you're never going to avoid that. But then it's the realization, wow, this pain really has shifted the way that I feel about something. That to me feels like the superpower.
Yeah.
Which is I know it's a little different to what you were saying, but I've arrived there at a different way to you, I think.
It's yours.
Yeah.
It's all yours.
But I've arrived through pain. I've arrived through dissatisfaction. I've arrived through literally getting to a space where I'm not doing this anymore. I've had enough of feeling like this. I've had enough of just this pressure and this constant down pushing on my soul and spirit. And then I guess, fortunate enough to have had a childhood or be born with a resilience inside myself that's like, okay, well, how do we get out of this? You know, how do we navigate out of this space? You piece of shit, you know?
It does feel like pain. There's a way of telling the story in which pain is like a detour, like we were saying before, a detour from connection with higher self to just work your way back, and that is true. But depending on where a recipient of that language, or whether it's talking to self or talking to other, depending on where the person's at on the emotional roller coaster, you might meet them in a very different place where you're speaking to anxiety itself. So you might just address it with, like a child, like just say, you're doing so well to be able to be feeling all of this. And you're not alone, and I'm here.
Everyone's so hard on themselves.
Another middle band would be the pain is the great transformer.
Yeah.
And that's a really important part of the dialogue, is that what's the point of the pain then? Why don't we just build a system, the world, in which we're aligned all the time? We go, we did.
That's what we're trying. That's what everyone's been toiling away at.
Well, yeah, there's that. And that's true too. But I mean, that's what the other place is like. When we all die, that's what the other place is like. This place of perfect union. And, But there's beauty in even the contrasting between those, where we would like to go, like a heaven on earth type realm, which is totally valid. And natural. It's the downstream momentum of what it is to be alive and human. But yeah, so something I love is the play of what the pain's all for. And when you talk about, I think we both have the ability or whatever, or the tendency or to intermittently celebrate pain as a transformer, because we can see that like it's something. It is
great
something.
Cleanser
and like it will break you so that you can hold, it's what you want. It's because on the other side, like in the simplest sense, if I get quiet and I can sit with the emotion, well, the intense ones are very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But you can develop that muscle to sit with them too. And if you ever get worried that you're getting lost in your own bullshit, look squarely into some pain and sit with it, and it will authenticate
Clarify,
you. Yeah. It's so beautiful.
Real fast.
Real fast. Because it's so messy. Like I think of childbirth. You can't fake a childbirth. You could use chemicals and stuff to numb out aspects of it and stuff, but if you leave it the way it is, and it is so raw and so utterly miraculous, it's all of it all at once. So what is the point of the pain? Yes, it transforms, but why not just jump to transformation if we're all gods anyway? There's something to be said for the radical appreciation of certain aspects of life and living, and in truth self. So we'd have to come up with our own examples, but if you were to experience a lot of fear in life, then eventually, when that's worked with elegantly and in time, and there is no rush, and there is unlimited compassion from the places that matter for how long a person might take to turn that corner, but bit by bit they are stacking the ability to coexist with fear, but perhaps most importantly, the ability to appreciate what it is to be courageous, or what it is to be peaceful, or what it is to be able to love and express from a place of stability and freedom despite turbulence. So that's the purpose, is that if you just jump straight to being a peaceful cat that didn't experience fear in the same way, it would be very hard to appreciate that equanimity. But because you've experienced such relentless and intense experiences of fear, it's been a real bumpy ride. Because that was so bumpy, there's exponential appreciation for what's on the other side. If you've experienced being in a toxic relationship, there's exponential appreciation for what it is to be in a divine union on the other end. So if you said, what I really want to come and experience is something like a divine union between he and her, or whatever version, gives you access to that depth, then you would experience not that.
Yeah.
So you can surge into that.
Appreciation of that.
And then appreciate it exponentially
And there's
more.
a robustness to it, I think, as well. Like, I think, there's the rare case of people who are, are in that space and they've found their way there organically. But then there's also just those, I'm sure you've experienced it, like those kind of brilliant flashes that you have that just don't last.
Yeah.
Where you're in that space, you're like, this is what it feels like. And then the next day something happens, you're like, oh, motherfucker.
Well, to
You know,
some
like
degree,
you're
that's
kind
life,
of-
right? Because nothing's static. Things
Yeah.
are moving all the time.
But there's a robustness when
Yep,
you've
that's
been
also
through a depth of
yeah.
pain, fear, you know, whatever
Well,
it is. Because you're familiar with it and you developed the tools and the,
Yeah.
you know.
I would say you're not afraid of it. That really is the threshold, is the tipping
Familiarity.
point. It's like I've been to some apex version of a big fuck off pain of that, let's say. So I've been to the very depths of that. I've been there. It's not nice. I wouldn't choose it, but if I'm forced there again, I will be okay.
Yeah.
Because I've been there before. And it's as if this other part of you, the universe, goes, well, we can't really wring any more juice out of that then, can we? Not that it's a torture chamber, but
Yeah.
there's moments where both you and I would have agreed, yes, it is. Yes, it is. It can feel
It
like
is sometimes.
that. Yeah, except when it's definitely not, except when it absolutely is.
I'm pretty sure you don't get to go through a life without experiencing that.
Well, when you said before that, some people are just these magical creatures that are already there, sure. I think that we're all in this, to the extent that we're all magical creatures, that plays out in that I step in, third party observe into a person's life, say, and they've got hell on earth in these three areas, but these two always land on their feet. Always. They're just taken care of. There isn't the same energetic resistance. The momentum is positive, expansive, and abundant in those areas of life. And I suggest they probably need that. You can't have all disaster all the time. One, that you wouldn't have the contrast to anchor yourself in to be able to work on the other areas, you know? So in some ways, that's true of everybody, that financially things just work out for Peter. But relationally, there's a big opportunity there to work through some stuff. I think that's awesome. I think it's a beautiful provisioning of life that it works that way.
It's
so
kind of
often.
reminded me like the Dungeons and Dragons thing. Like you can have a heap
Of course it does, yeah.
strength and charisma, but your dexterity and intelligence is, is
Right.
low and it needs work.
Sliders.
And it's like, yeah.
Yeah. So we were saying before about we sit around the fire and we add increasing amounts of authenticity, as much as we can bear, as much as we can garner and come up with on the day. And then we come into more and more resonance, and then we both get nourished by this fire in the middle. So I'm in touch with now that the quality's better now than it was 20 minutes ago. And my system is working better in this expressive thing that we're doing now. Can you feel that?
I mean, we feel more on the flow to me.
Yeah.
Like it feels more of a kind of, we've found something we're both passionate and excited and have both experienced. Like there's a common ground in what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But I feel like, as I said before, I feel like we've arrived at that space through different mechanisms, which is quite fascinating. Like it's interesting for me to hear how you've arrived there and, and it being different from mine.
But that's interesting because I'm experiencing that they're quite similar.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we're both talking about grief as a transformer or pain as a great transformer.
Or just having enough of something. Yeah.
Same deal. Because it's the absence of a thing you know is better.
Yeah.
You're like,
That's right.
I've had enough of feeling disconnected from myself. I think that would be consistent with the other ones as well.
Yeah. Okay. This question sounds like this. Sometimes I have problems maintaining the difference between empathy and my emotional boundaries. Do you have any advice?
I do. Or I like the topic and it's very juicy. And I dare to say like relevant to our time. The difference between empathy and having poor boundaries.
Or having emotional boundaries. Yeah.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is kind of archetypal, and it's this premise of what it is to be an empath. So the difference between empathy and being empathic might be being able to put yourself in the shoes of another and going, wow, that's what they're experiencing. God, I feel that so deeply. As opposed to being empathic, which would be to actually experience like if the sadness is working through the heart of another being and then you're actually experiencing their sadness in your heart, that would be an empathic moment. So just some clarification around that. There's, in the last, 20 years, some of the identification around being an empath has become more and more prevalent. And like anything, that's double-edged. And so it can help soothe a person to go, why do I feel so much stuff? And I feel like a sensitive creature. Usually there's an underbelly to that that's like, I feel like people are a bit insensitive with me, or they don't really get me. And of course that is a thing that plays out in the human process. There's a premise that I've heard in more recent years, which is that like so many neurological dispositions, like ADHD or whatever, that it may well have a trauma root, this kind of opportunity to explore it in a new way. So does an empath begin with a trauma root as well? And one of the... Is this new to you?
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
it makes sense now that you say it. I'm kind of like, yeah.
So one of the... I mean, essentially what I'm trying to be delicate with here, and this isn't really to the question asker specifically, but is this concept of like, am I really empathic, or is this an ego trip? Am I identifying being hypersensitive so I can protect certain soft spots of me that I'm not ready to look at, that kind of thing? Now, is it true that our sensitivity, the sensitivity of some is greater than others? I think that's objectively so.
Yeah.
How much is vastly more subjective and confusing. Is it also true that as I develop my practice, two things happen? I come into more and more robust relationship with myself, and so I'm better internally resourced, so I don't need the validation or behavioral conformity from other like I once did, so I'm steadier, like we were saying before, right? But also you become more sensitive to what's going on around you. So somehow both of those things are true at the same time as well. So you can see perhaps the hook of maybe ego attachment, and just playing with that word ego attachment here, because ego is like a natural organ of the human experience. Like my lungs breathe, my ego attaches and builds personality. These are all, Luke gets to exist because of an ego. So it's a welcome and in a way almost neutral part of being human. We just want to be in charge of it not in charge of us. So we're playing the ego game, it's not playing us. Yeah, so there is the danger of becoming sort of ego identified as an empath in an unhealthy way. So the way one might explore that is to then go and look at, is there a trauma root to this? The archetype is, as a child, there was, and I'm borrowing this from other teachers, is there's a child that walks into their lounge room, and rather than being met by two parents that are predominantly devoted and focused on creating a space of emptiness for the child, so they're the container for the child to grow and express and to normalize the humaning, like so that their emotions are welcome and that they can, there's nothing you can't bring here. There's also boundaries, so you can't hurt people, whatever, recklessly, but the emotions are all welcome for processing here. Now, when there's a parent who's particularly mercurial and might show up with some containment, or might show up with a kind of explosive emotion in which the container disappears, or perhaps more specifically put, the container's not there very often, and it's more about the love will disappear. So the parent will give open love if they feel good, but if they don't, then they won't. And a child that all children require containment to be healthy, but love to survive. And so if all of a sudden love is very conditional, then the child will conform to said conditions. So if you've got a really mercurial parent that's up and down and all over the place, then the child will learn to cater to that. And what we've created a long way around to, instead of the parent being the container for the child, the child becomes parentified, as they say in psychology. So the child becomes the container for the adult, for the parent in this case. Now the empath bit comes in. Now you've got a child who has a vested interest, and we've necessitated being incredibly sensitive to the emotional state of others. So what can happen is a child ends up with a hyperdevelopment of their third eye in the esoteric sense, and so they walk into the room and are tuned to the emotional state of, yes, key figures, but really they're developing that muscle for everybody. So now we can see a pathway in which an overrepresentation of emotional sensitivity to other has developed. And often in adult relationships, they're then going to go and create connections sponsored by them attuning to the needs of others, attuning to the emotional well-being of others. And that's the only way that they know love. And yet that plays out romantically, spousally, but perhaps across all different relationships. So maybe that's jumping right off the deep end to address that question.
It's beautiful.
But then how to create boundaries within that.
Because immediately when you're saying all of those things, my brain is like, okay, so I'm pretty sure that someone listening to this is going to be in that position and is recognizing what you're talking about, and it's going, that's awfully familiar.
Okay.
So where do they go? What's the space in which they kind of not neutralize, because it's a beautiful gift that they have.
Yeah.
But how do they become more aware of it? How do they protect it? And how do they nurture their own nourishment? You know?
So, I mean, ultimately it will be in relationship. Because a boundary requires two parties. Something I love, and I think has come up in the pod before, is, I know it has actually now that I go to think about it, creating boundaries and remembering that that's a dogmatic exercise, just creating boundaries, unless it's motivated deeply and fiercely by love. And love in its purity will be about both parties. So the premise being that what's inside the boundaries. We don't just want to put up fences, what's actually inside the boundary. And there is this vulnerable but also precious and wonderful self, coming right back to before, like that unique energy signature of Paulness is inside of there. And the human parts of that can be hurt. The neurological parts of that can be hurt. And we want to shore those up so that more and more of the divine parts can be integrated into it. So we're taking care of the flesh and blood so that we can dance more of the really good stuff through it, like a bottleneck of infinity being compressed into this wonderful finite portal. So it'll be grounded in relationship and setting boundaries. So you're in a dialogue with somebody, and you feel an emotion arise. You go, I feel hurt by what they said there. I'm going to see what I can do to temper this conversation, to perhaps see if I can dial myself back a little bit and protect, or if I feel safe enough, say, hey, when you said that hurt, I felt all this sadness arise. And then that alone, for somebody who's been living in a certain empathic style way, let's say like a trauma-rooted empath or something, will be a really fierce corner to turn, to be able to sit in that and in a real way stay in touch.
And you would hope the other person on the receiving end of that is caring and can offer them some not offering validation, I guess, but you would hope that they're in a position where they've chosen someone, or at least they're close with somebody that they're able to.
Of course, you would hope that. The truth is,
but who cares really? Because I guess the actual act of doing it is the most important part, because you're learning to.
I think it's really accurate in saying the most important part of it is the. Sorry, what did we say? The most important part of it is the caring part.
Or you're learning to care for yourself.
So it's
and to respect
what is
your
care
own.
Then? In this instance, so this person is going to show care through the containment would be really, really healthy. But so often there's the language of care. Well, both ways, that the dance is reciprocal. One of the pathways you find is that typically, depending on how entrenched in these patterning someone is, if they're way down the end of it, then most of their intimate inner circle will be corresponding to that energy, like lock and key, like two puzzle pieces fitting together. They've built relationship around, I'll be really attuned to you and we'll make this about you. And then in some cases, or often enough, the only relationships they're capable of cultivating are around, you care about you and I'll care about you and we'll kind of forget about me. So you don't have to look down that corridor because that's the way you've understood things. Really fierce.
Wow.
So to slowly build a relationship with self and then require that those that dance with you, perhaps in your inner circle, which doesn't need to be many people, or maybe one or two or three or half a dozen if you're lucky or something, but one or two is all we really perhaps need to lead a healthy life, I'd suggest, is that you say like, hey, when you said this came up and I'm not blaming you for it, but it also did happen, and it wobbles me. And I would like to know, while we're practicing openness and it's kind of fluid and in some ways like we're relaxing boundaries to open up to each other so that I feel safer, can you just demonstrate to me that you do care about what's happening in my experience? And often if you get met with, of course I do. What's this accusation? You're like, okay, I'm doing everything I can to make this blameless, and it's still being received that way.
Yeah.
There's a psychological phenomenon that if you're in a certain relationship and if you feedback hasn't been a characterizing component of the relationship, and all of a sudden you offer it in a diplomatic way, which I think that probably was, like that's certainly intending to be what I just offered as an example. And instantly you get boundaries, and there's not like you get pushback, and there's not a going away, integrating, and then coming back, which of course it's hard to hear feedback. It's very human. To perhaps you could say hear blame where it isn't, or to, I don't know, maybe there is blame there. But in essence, if you offer feedback once and that's the end of the relationship, the truth of that relationship has just been revealed.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's terrifying for the human beings en masse, I think. Perhaps because of what we were talking about before, a depth of connection with self hasn't been primary. So if you're really well resourced inside, you can go, I love you so much, but I can let go of this anytime we need to. That's fierce.
Thanks for the clarification.
Well, yeah.
Of what's truly playing out.
But there's all the grief, and it's like, I'm about to lose this person for forever, and I'm going to grieve that and cry and all the things and all the stories and all the... But at some point, it's like, well, that's maximum 49% of the story, because 51% of the story is, but I've got to maintain this connection with myself. In the end, we actually want to be most empathically sensitive to ourselves, because no one else can be. You could have the most exalted being, but they cannot be the most sensitive emotional creature, but they cannot be more attuned to you than they are to themselves, because we live inside this version of the Truman Show kind of thing. Like, we live inside this screenplay that's playing out, and so we have access to all the intonations.
You know, when you start to understand that there's a deep connection to self that is available, but it costs you vulnerability and it costs you fierce protection of yourself at the same time. It sounds like a dichotomy. But you have to look after yourself.
Yeah.
But you also, if you want it to be worthy of anything, you have to be open and vulnerable. But don't take any prisoners either.
Yeah.
It's great. I love it.
It's the juice, because you could retire to the cave for forever. But you would stagnate your growth. You'd integrate maybe it's as simple as that. You'd integrate the experiences you had, but newness would what's the word? Avoid you. That's the better word. Would withdraw from you. Elude you.
There you go.
Hey. What's crazy is there is so much talk in pop culture about how narcissistic we've become, and I think it's
that word's so topical. I know, right now,
is we're missing the anchoring in self. It's just like, you need to respect my truth on all this stuff. It's like, if I love you, and we want to continue a deep relationship, then that makes some sense. But you're talking to the world. You're asking the world to conform to your sensitivity. That's not what empowerment is. In fact, inversely, the insensitivity and preoccupation of the rest of the world is where your deep connection with self is necessitated. And then you can journey out and go, you guys do you. Thanks so much for the full spectrum of the rainbow. Like, thanks for all this diversity that's out here. And that includes, like, what do we do with our broken heart when a landslide happens in the third world and 20,000 people die in an hour? Like, how do I keep myself open while that's still going on? That's like a direct Ram Dass reference. How do we do it? And that's, again, coming right back to the balancing fully online esoterically and fully online humanistically. I know those souls are absolutely fine. I also know that my humanity deserves the arena to grieve.
Yeah, the acknowledgement of the depth of that sadness.
And that grief will grow me to hold more of that esotericness inside myself. And they are, in my reckoning, lovers. The human part is that feminine part, the deep feeler and real maker of things, the expressor, the pleasure and the suffering. And the other part is infinity, that will expand her and open her up to ecstatic expressions of herself, experiences of herself, and he will find and revel in her the pleasure of authenticity that she is. And so with every little cookie crumb of suffering, like he finds himself, like he descends into this, descends the operative word, descends into his feminine aspects, or he's called into that part of himself and becomes her, and she descends into new depths of feeling, and therefore it gets further from infinity and then turns back up and can, so if you imagine it as a sine wave, it's right down into the deepest descent it's ever been in. It's able to hold, in some ways, more pain, more reality, more human, and then turn back up and go, wow, I've never been this far. That the trough is so far from the next peak that they've never been further, but their magnetism and speed launching towards each other has never been greater. And so now her appetite for the divine and the infinite is vastly greater.
But it's also too, like for me, it's a touch different, because it's kind of talking about the credit we give others before they've earned it. You know, like,
yeah,
I used to do that. I used to do that a lot.
The presumption.
Yeah. And I was talking to my daughter about this morning. We were driving to school, and it just blows your mind sometimes, because, again, you know, everyone's at a different part of the journey. For me, I was like, I guess it's, you know, I can't even remember how we got onto the topic, but we got onto the topic of like how people see the world, and different people see the world differently. And how I used to think that everyone saw the world the same way I did for a long time, you know, and I would talk to them like that. And sometimes they would look at me like I'm nuts, or I would fry their brain a bit, or whatever. Or they just wouldn't enjoy my company. I got a lot as a young man, like arrogant, or, you know, where I was just really passionate and had quite strong, sure ideas.
Yeah. Opinionativeness was easy.
Yeah.
For you. Yeah.
And it was amazing. She was just like, yeah, you know, of course everyone sees it differently. How can they see it the same way I do? And I'm kind of like, you're 11. How's this possible? I'm sure I was like in my 20s before I worked out. Maybe late teens, you know, like before you worked out, like, oh, everyone doesn't have the same ideas and thoughts, and because there's cursory things that you don't agree on, of course. Yeah. But the real deep things, you kind of think, everyone's kind of like trying to find their place, I guess, and everyone's thinking deeply about their existence, aren't they? And on some level, yes, they are, but on a gross level, I think a lot of people are not. A lot of people are very, they're in the materialism model that's been so prevalently expounded in the West, you know.
So the beauty of that to me is that there's a presumption that we're overlapping in these really key and important ways, and then through discomfort, I don't doubt, you've worked out that that's not really the case, or much less so than you thought.
Yeah, that's right.
So reverse engineering it's been, by working out what other people aren't, I'm much clearer on what I am.
Yes. Or being misunderstood a lot.
Indeed, that's the pushback. That's the pain as the transformer. So then you emerge more and more as clearer about who you are. And there is a self-validation process in that, because you feel comfortable with it. Yeah. One, I'm clearer about what I am, and it feels good to be clearer. I'm in touch with myself, which is say, I have all this stuff inside of me that is resourcing, and I'm connected to it. And what you find, I think, is so this whole process of like disconnect, presumed connection, the revelation that it's actually disconnect has driven you through the transformation of pain to deeper connection with self. You're like, wow. And as it happens, then you emerge from that a bit more transformed, a lot more connected to self, and the love you feel for other people is so much more potent. And they feel more relaxed around you because they're allowed to just be themselves. We were having a conversation off air about parents and how things soften over time. I don't doubt that's a layer of that they feel more comfortable, the less affronted by the way that you are, because you're less affronted by the way that you are, because you are the way that you are. Whereas before there was like, come on, I know you guys are on board. Let's just do it. And they're like, we're not.
What are you talking about?
We're not. And there's no rush to be there. A topic that's always felt a bit volatile to me is this concept of spiritual hierarchy. Within spirituality, it's a no-no. You're not supposed to put yourself above or below. And yet, if you live that way with a dedication to a regular spiritual practice, you're cleansing your system all the time, and then you work out that it's really great to share this very intimate, almost pure, is I think an okay word to use, part of yourself. And that you don't share it with just anybody. You share it with resonant people. And there are people who are doing a spiritual trip, and there's people who aren't. There's people who are halfway and aren't. And the irony is, it's going to be so scary to go, well, shit, I think I'm doing a specific kind of work here that has a higher vibration than others. And I feel a little anxious saying it in front of a microphone because it's so antithetical to classical spiritual culture. But it's also, in an unspoken way, it's part of it, is you don't share your deep spiritual call with just anybody. You share it with a select few. And the discernment of that in and of itself is a practice, and a beautiful practice of self-recognition.
You do it wrong a couple of times and
it blows up in your face. Stand up in front of a bunch of people and talk about God and see how you go, Or talk about the fact that you can manifest anything that you want to, or that there's only one of us in the room, or that I'm Paul and I'm actually God, everybody, and then, but don't worry, you are too, and they didn't hear the second bit. There's your nervousness. we found Paul's boundary. So, you find out where the sensitivities are. But what I've found is that the more I've let myself make peace with that, and I've had to, because like you were alluding before, like you do it, you put your sensitivity in the wrong place a few times, and you quickly work out, oh my God, like I cannot do that. This soft core needs me to stand up for it in that way and put this in the right place. And yet I still really do want to share. I don't want to be so disappeared into myself that I don't share these important and vital parts of me. So you share them in the right places. But the beauty is, you find more love for others, because there's a certain, if you accept who you are and it feels really right and balanced inside your chest or whatever, there's a natural allowing people to be themselves. And you find, wow, that felt like I allowed myself to step into a bigger version of myself. And it was scary because I didn't want to have this ego attachment. I didn't want to elevate myself other people. But you find that when it's beautiful and inspired by love, and you move into it and allow yourself to sort of bloom into a go up. A dear friend of mine would say, like, up level, like go up a level, like eat a mushroom in Mario and go up a level kind of thing, a bigger version of yourself, that you don't feel elevated above anybody else. You feel more in love with everybody else. So now we're playing with like allowing a love-inspired ego expansion, which is, for me, for a long time was like a being a rebel, it's like a form of spiritual revolt or something. But I think that's stemmed in a misunderstanding of what growth's supposed to look like. So you accept the world more and more as it is, and you feel more and more yourself, and that feels radically powerful all at once.
I experience it as more of like just a different part of the journey. Like, so say there's a path that's set forth, and you're looking at it. You could be looking up at a mountain, and there's a horizontal path, and everyone's walking and they're enjoying their journey and stuff. And for me, it feels like I've just been on this path for longer, perhaps. Then you might have just started. You might be, or you could be in the middle. And there are people that are far, far further ahead than I. But for me, there's a beautiful acknowledgement of the fact that you have been contemplating, and you have been expanding, and you have been exerting energy in the pursuit of something greater. And so you are acknowledging that inside yourself. But at the same time, there is no, like you said, there is nothing about you that's greater or worse, which is also very beautiful, or worse than anybody else.
Yeah, and both are equally as important to state. Maybe it is as simple as like the primary comparison is between Luke and who Luke used to be. And if it's anchored in that, because when you're talking about all that up leveling, in your description there, it's all implied that I've put in work, and I've been a willing participant in the work that humaning is, that just happens. I didn't have to seek it out, it found me. And and I've been able to meet it more than I used to, and now I'm different, and how wonderful.
Mm.
And I don't know, someone might say, call that a healthy ego expansion, or maybe a bit too self-involved or something. It's like, but that sounds like a wonderful promise for anybody. That the more I am myself, the better that I feel, the less I need from other people. And
well, you can feel it
it's a promise for anyone.
You can feel it in yourself, I think.
Yeah.
Like you can feel it in the peace that is your life, and in the lack of self-criticism, and in the lack of criticism of others, and in the lack of, general negativity.
Yeah.
And then the amount of natural buoyancy that exists in your life. Like, it's way less effort to be in a state of equilibrium for myself now than it was in my younger years. Like, I just can live in this space where it's like, even when things aren't that great, it's like, yeah, but they're not that bad, are they? It's like, oh, who said that? It's like, the guy that's been here for ages.
Yeah, my benevolent psychosis said that.
Yeah. What's your take on this is just a personal question because I'm fascinated on the idea. So you forget everything. So reincarnation, let's just say it's true for the purposes of this question. You forget everything when you come back. But do you feel that there are obviously really deep lessons affect you so deeply that they become part of your psyche, they become part of your soul? There's marks on your soul, there's burns, and there's, what's your take on that?
Well, it's like the nature versus nurture argument, right? Like, is this something you come in with in maybe on a spiritual scale?
Yeah, no. Sorry, I misunderstood. I see what you mean.
So it's not, I guess genealogy would be the other layer there, that it wasn't the way that my community and parents shaped me, but it was my DNA that shaped me. But then there's also is there a soul level to this stuff? To me, they're all the same thing. It's all one thread running through all of it. Maybe having existed in an esoteric type of community or spiritual culture or something, I have a wariness around taking past life stuff as anything more serious than a metaphor.
You think we just start fresh every time?
No, I don't. But as its practical application, I'm glad you helped me to discern that more clearly. As a practical application, yes. This has been going on. This didn't begin, right? You weren't born, not the real you. This has been going on forever. So therefore there must be infinite, maybe, it's not just ancient, but infinite impressions from before. But the specificity of identity around those can be limiting in my experience. So it's like, I used to be a pharaoh, or I used to be a beggar, or whatever. It's like, yeah, we giggle about it. And I think there's a certain health in that, because it's like, oh, sure, lots of things have happened and they're all very real. And there's only one of us in the room anyway. So it's like, okay, well, no, but then there is a soul pathway. So, okay, that's totally reasonable. But what can happen is we get caught up in it. So the inverse position of all of that is that the most optimal coordinates for your consciousness to land is here and now. So contemplation of the impressions from before, they matter to the extent that they can enhance your contact of interface with here and now. That's what really matters. So if, you had this experience and it left an emotional impression that's circulating through and looking to be processed, that's what's going on all the time. So the premise being that you come in with this sort of vibrational imprint that gives you a starting point, like a coordinate point to start from. And it is resonant with the universe and draws all these experiences in to surgically tease out certain things. So the premise would be the things that happened in our childhood that were uncomfortable, let's say, or early before now, we called in. That's how that would happen, is because we had a certain vibrational arrangement of ourselves inside. The energy that we came in with then drew that stuff in so we could play certain things out. That's a very esoteric perspective, and in some moments it's much more helpful to attune to a more human emotional perspective and say let's just grieve right now. Let's not attune to this is the work I've got to do and this is an exalted opportunity. It's the opportunity is to be as raw AF with this right now and bleed. And does that answer the question?
Yeah, totally.
So I think it can be misconstrued, in which we take that we over personalize what happened before this place. Interestingly,
I thought you were going to go, the reason I started laughing before is I thought you were going to go to that thing of like everyone's always someone famous in their past life.
Oh, I did, in a way.
They were never
the pharaoh.
but then
goes
you
to the beggar.
included the beggar. No one was ever just I was a
it's
blacksmith.
apex either way. It's profound suffering or it's profound exalted success or whatever. I think something similar happens with shamanic work from in my experience, and that's a place that I've had experience, but it's not a culture that I have I don't know. I couldn't write a book about shamanic culture. I don't know about it as much as others do. But if we all come from the one, if we all come from source, if we all come from this other place of perfect love, and then you can use certain chemicals, medicines, to contact those places, which it's like picking up the phone and calling home. And it can be a wonderful reacquainting with truth, with who you really are and how up for this process you are. But again, up for this process implies that the coordinate points that we want to attune to is right here and now, in this human form, right here and now. And reacquainting with the part of us that is so up for it is sick and empowering, and I don't know, it can really, what's the word, like line up all your power, converge all the right energy to get back to business kind of thing. But we've got to get back to business. Yeah. In my experience, in a personal way, is like, okay, I can keep visiting plant medicines over and over and over, and then the voice of higher wisdom from those places, the voice on the other end of the phone call is like, what are you doing? Stop calling home. You left here to go there. Why do you need to keep coming back? You might as well just end your business there, as in you might as well kill yourself and just come back. That's essentially what you're achieving by phoning back all the time. I'm not dispelling the efficacy of shamanic practices here, but that's been my experience with it, that just like dwelling in past lives or interdimensional dialogue or whatever, they all have validity. But to me, their primary purpose is to enhance and empower your experience here. The universe makes no mistakes. So being able to be as fully here as possible, to be as fully online humanistically and esoterically as you can. And if those things help you do that, great. If they're not, if they're causing you to drift away from your humanity more and more and more and become more apathetic to things, then it's something we've got to look at. Yeah. And to me, that takes the form of people kind of over-analyzing what can happen on medicine trips and almost setting up schematics for how they are, and making that culture more primary than here might be the simplest way. And that's I experience that as a little repellent. It's not for me. That's just my personal perspective.
So before, you weren't saying people should kill themselves. I'm just clarifying that.
Yep, that's right. I don't think people should.